Well, welcome. Hopefully, everyone is having a great day. Hopefully, all us Met fans are getting ready for spring training because, oh boy, it is coming up and it is coming up quickly. I still think our team has a lot of moves left to make, but when I hear David Stearns talk, he's been making the rounds. I'm very confident. He's saying that this is a continual process, that the team is far from being complete. He wants to do his analysis. He wants to do his assessment. Okay, so we're going to get into the big topic of the day, and it's probably going to be the big topic of the entire year, quite frankly. But first, as always, if you could support the channel, help us grow, share our videos, and like and subscribe. It helps us out tremendously. Okay, so the topic of the video is none other than what is going on with Mr. Pete Alonso. Really, it's going to be, like I mentioned, the topic for the entire year. We're going to hear, is Pete potentially going to go? Is Pete going to stay? And a lot of insiders right now, they are doing their job, I guess, by kind of guessing and putting some fodder out there with regards to if they believe Pete Alonso is going to go or if Pete is going to stay. Most recently, I heard two perspectives today. I heard Jerry Blevins leaning on the side where he thinks Pete is going to go, and then we're going to talk about Anthony DiComo, who kind of thinks that Pete is going to stay. So I think there's going to be a lot of uncertainty. There's going to be a lot of nobody really knows what the heck is going on, because obviously Pete Alonso and Scott Boras, those are the only two people who really know what's going on their side. Yes, they may be eventually communicating with the Mets and David Stearns, Steve Cohen, but it really hasn't come to that point yet. Also, in this video, I also want to get into some numbers, what the contract actually might look like, what a contract that Pete may accept, because I think that's going to be interesting as well. But let's get into the Jerry Blevins news, because it was on WFAN. He was having an interview with Sal Licata and Brandon Tierney, and they were basically talking about what Jerry thought about the whole offseason. And, he was going on to say, yeah, the pitching might work out. It's yet to be seen. But the big news is Pete Alonso going to be a Met? And, at first, Jerry was speaking from the heart, and BT goes, oh, before you answer this, there has to be no sentimental attachment. I want you to answer this like you have no attachment to the New York Mets. So then he goes, oh, okay. Well, right off the bat, the Mets can't replace Pete. There is nobody in Major League Baseball that can replace a guy like Pete. He's an old school slugger, and there's nobody in baseball that can provide that replacement. And BT responds, there is no doubt, but do you believe he will be a Met next year? And right from Blevins' mouth, and he's an insider. I would say he has friends on the team. He has sources. Yes, he probably is not communicating directly with Pete, but he goes that there's a strong possibility that Pete Alonso will not be a Met coming 2025, that this may be his last year. Now, they didn't go into the conversation about why he bases his opinions like that, but the thing that Jerry did say is, he goes, well, you have to look at it this way. The Mets and Pete Alonso's going to be looking for a massive contract, an Albert Pujols-like contract, a Miguel Cabrera-like contract, a contract that will be long in years and high in dollar value. He will be giving the Mets no discount whatsoever. So, and according to Jerry Blevins, he doesn't see the Mets making that type of long-term investment in a 30-year-old first baseman. Now, here's the thing. Pete Alonso, and I'm talking from my perspective right now, I don't necessarily agree with Jerry. That's just Jerry really giving his opinion. And that's all it is right now. It's an opinion. So Jerry Blevins believes that Pete Alonso, there's a good chance Pete may not play with the Mets in 2025, that it's going to be tough for the Mets to spend $250, $300 million in a 30-year-old first baseman. Now, I look at it a little differently. Now, Pete Alonso is a guy who, quite frankly, could be considered the Mets' best offensive player in their team's history. Their best offensive player in their team's history. Yes, the Mets have had other sluggers. I mean, you can go back. Obviously, they had Darryl Strawberry, Mike Piazza, recently David Wright. They've had some good players. They have had some good hitters, but they've had no slugger like Pete Alonso. And the consistency at which this man produces cannot be undersold. It really can't. And then you also got to know that Pete Alonso is more valuable to us, the New York Mets, than he is to any other franchise. I mean, when he grows with the New York Mets, if he's in his 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th year, and he is shattering all the New York Mets record, obviously that's going to be a financial benefit to Steve Cohen and the rest of the organization. Not to mention, if he has a Hall of Fame career, that is going to benefit the New York Mets. So obviously, it's going to work out beneficially to the New York Mets. Now, Pete Alonso, if he decides to go elsewhere, you know what? I'm saying he's going to get paid a lot of money if he goes to elsewhere, but he's not going to have the support of the fan base through thick and thin. The New York Mets fans will always support their homegrown superstars. They will. So you know what? Pete will have like those stretches where he's not at that elite level, but at the end of the day, if you're a homegrown superstar and you're from New York City, especially if you're in the Mets city, you're going to be supported. If Pete decides to chase the money, to run and chase the money, he's not going to have that same benefit of the fan base supporting him through thick and thin. And I got to say this, that is something to really heavily consider. Being with one organization your entire career is something. It really is. Now, Pete has mentioned throughout the years, and as most recently, how he loves to play in New York. He mentioned to Scott Boras that, hey, he's open to negotiating before he becomes a free agent with the New York Mets. And that is significant because Scott Boras traditionally does not want to negotiate with teams before his players go to free agency. His philosophy is he'd rather negotiate with 30 teams as opposed to one. But if Pete Alonso, if that's his ultimate goal to be a New York Met, then that's what he's pushing Scott Boras to. Now, at the end of the day, whether Pete really wants to be a Met or not, Scott Boras wants to guarantee the man that he gets the highest contract possible. It doesn't matter. There's going to be no hometown discount because Pete Alonso, and that's what kind of shocked the New York Mets. Pete Alonso recently changed agent. He wasn't always represented by Scott Boras. This is just a recent occurrence within the last year that he's changed representative to Scott Boras. So what does that really mean? Does that mean that he wants to test the market? Does that mean he wants to play elsewhere? Or does that mean he wants to play for the Mets, but he wants to make the most money? Now, I think that it's the latter of the three. I think that he just wanted to get the best deal possible, and he still wants to play the Mets. He gives off the vibe that he wants to be a New York Met. Now, David Stearns, obviously, we know that he's a brand new general manager / president, and he's had really no experience playing with Pete Alonso or running the team with Pete Alonso. So there's going to be no personal attachment. And that's not bad. That's not bad. I don't want him to make an emotional decision. I want him to assess what Pete Alonso is worth to our organization both on and off the field. Because frankly, folks, he is worth as much to the New York Mets on the field as he is off the field. Because like I said, I'm mentioning he quite possibly could be, and I keep saying this throughout the year, our best offensive player in Mets history. Right now, in his prime, playing in Queens, we have our best offensive player in Mets history. A guy who can slug close to 50 home runs, 120 RBIs. I mean, that is nuts. That is nuts. How many other times going into a season that we could put a number 3 or 4 hitter and count on him doing that? So, all right. So that being said, Pete's a great asset to have in the middle of the lineup. You have Francisco Lindor, who's going to be there for the next 8-9 years. So you have another number 2 or number 3 hitter already there. Now the Mets have to do Pete justice. They really do. And this is why I've been so pressing hard for the Mets to get a 5-hitter, because not only does a 5-hitter strengthen the lineup, but that really tells me you want to keep Pete Alonso, because a 5-hitter, a solid 5-hitter will help Pete Alonso in a tremendous way. The way Pete Alonso was pitched last year was horribly. I mean, like, pitchers were hitting the guy. They were giving him nasty pitches because the guy had no damn protection. And I'm telling you right now, Pete recognizes that it is a significant deal to protect your best hitter. You protect your best hitter. That's what you do. And we all saw it. Us Met fans saw it last year in June when Pete Alonso was having his best season in his career and he was hit. I think he was hit by Charlie Morton in the hand, and that took a month and a half away from his season. I think he had something broke in his hand. He was supposed to be out for 6 weeks, and the man came back 10 days later. Now, did he come back and play well? No, he didn't, but he was supposed to come back in 6 weeks. The Mets needed him. They were in the middle of the terrible month of June, and Pete said, you know what? I'm going to still put this team on my back. That shows you what type of character this guy has, what type of leadership he provides. But unfortunately, the team was just on a sinking ship. There was nothing he could do, and Pete wasn't at his best. He was playing. He wasn't healthy. So it didn't really do him service to be out there, but he was doing the best he could. Okay, but that just goes back to what I was saying. You need to protect Pete. If you're going to hit Pete, if you're not going to throw him pitchers, the number 5 hitter has to make the pitcher pay. There is no doubt about it. Daniel Vogelbach, I know he's not on the team, but you have to be able to provide him with somebody substantial. Now, everybody's saying, you know what? You shift to the rookies. Yes, that might be an eventual number 5 hitter, but Mark Vientos, a guy like that, is not ready to take over the DH position and bat 5th day 1 of the 2024 season. He's not. If he gets hot in April and May, it may be an eventual reality, but you need somebody there who is already established from day 1. The reason why I say this is because the first 2 to 3 months of the 2024 season is going to be extremely pivotal. That is when David Stearns is going to be able to make his evaluation and possibly determine if the New York Mets are going to be buyers or sellers. If they're possibly if this is the team that is going to trade Pete Alonso or keep Pete Alonso. So you got to make sure that the Mets are well equipped, especially in the lineup, to produce at a high level. Now, another guy that was bandied about is Francisco Alvarez, and I love Francisco Alvarez, a 25-year-old catcher who can hit 30 home runs, who's improving defensively. I mean, this guy is going to be a stud, and I wouldn't mind locking him up to one of those extended rookie contracts, something like the Braves do to like an 8-year contract. I really wouldn't mind. He's just that good. But the fact is, Alvarez batted 206 last year. He batted 206. So I expect him to get significantly better, but I don't want to heap that pressure on the guy and put him protecting Pete. And then also, too, if you bat Alvarez 7th, 8th in the lineup, your lineup is that much stronger. So what this is all coming down to is we need a guy, and I'm going to keep saying this. I've been saying this name since October, since before the season ended. The perfect guy to protect Pete would be Soler. That is going to be the perfect guy to protect Pete. And I'll tell you one thing. Today, Blevins said, don't be surprised. Another guy that could protect Pete, and this would shock the hell out of me, but he's saying, look for a guy like the Mets potentially to sign a Bellinger. Now, I that would shock the hell out of me. But, that's what he was saying. He was saying, you know what? He's a guy, who could play patrol center field, bat in the middle of your lineup. He could bat from the left side, and I'm thinking about it. I'm like, yeah, he wasn't represented by Scott Boras, maybe, but that's what Jerry Blevins was saying. But bottom line, whether you get a Jorge Soler, a Bellinger to bat in the 5th spot, you need legit a guy who's a professional bat and who's a slugger, quite frankly, who could strike fear into batters when they don't pitch to Pete Alonso. And besides, you want Pete to be getting good pitchers this year, and you need that protection behind him in the lineup. All right, so what I want to get into is, I just told you what Blevins said. Blevins was giving the negative side to the Pete Alonso equation, that we're not going to sign him. Now I want to get into what Mr. Anthony DiComo has said about Pete Alonso. And Anthony DiComo, for any of you who are not familiar with him, he's a guy who covers the New York Mets. He's considered an insider. He's actually one of my favorite Mets insiders. I really have a lot of confidence and a lot of trust in what he says. So we're going to look at some work that Anthony has, and I want to get into his opinion. And I'm going to bring that up on the screen right now so we can all check it out. Okay. Okay, so Mets Insider shares Pete Alonso trade update. So New York Mets insider Anthony DiComo of MLB seems convinced the club will hold on to All-Star first baseman Pete Alonso through the entire 2024 season, even if Alonso remains on track to reach free agency this coming fall. Okay, so this is a direct quote from Anthony DiComo. As we sit here today, it's difficult for me to consider a trade of Alonso at all likely. Even in July, DiComo wrote for a newsletter shared on Tuesday. Mets president of baseball operations David Stearns and team owner Steve Cohen know how unpopular it would be. They also have to believe they'll be the heavy favorites to re-sign Alonso in free agency. Unless the relationship deteriorates significantly between now and mid-season, it's reasonable to think Alonso will remain a Met at least for the duration of the summer and quite possibly for many years to come. So as I mentioned, Alonso raised eyebrows when he hired Scott Boras as his new agent shortly before the slugger was heavily linked with the Chicago Cubs this past October. More recently, Bob Nightingale predicted that the Mets will make Alonso available to other teams ahead of this summer's trade deadline. It was also said that the popular polar bear isn't expected to sign an extension before he reaches free agency, and it was later suggested Alonso may want a one-day feature for either the Cubs or the New York Yankees. So I don't know where the heck that is coming from. I've heard that bandied about, the Cubs or the Yankees, but these are just rumors, and that's all they are. As recently as last week, Stearns insisted he's pretty darn confident Alonso is going to be a first baseman on opening day. Okay, now, that is obviously going to be the case. And DiComo goes on to say that guys that have been represented by Scott Boras, like Brandon Nimmo, have come to deals with Steve Cohen and the New York Mets. So it's not impossible to strike a deal with Scott Boras. If there's a deal to be had and his player is going to be happy and going to make a significant amount of money, it doesn't matter who he signs with. So there is a heavy chance that if Pete Alonso wants to be a Met, he will be a Met. You got to remember, we have the richest owner in baseball. We have a heck of a lot of payroll coming off after the 2024 season. So there's a high possibility that if the New York Mets want Pete Alonso, they will sign Pete Alonso. That's just basically the facts. That's the facts. Okay. Hey, what's going on, man? Overboard, how's it going tonight? Yeah, good morning to you. It's late. Hopefully you're having a great night. And I was just about to say, these Pete Alonso videos, I'm telling you, are tough, are really rough. I get most of my negative comments, and I get great comments. I gotta say, like the community is awesome. But most of my negative comments are about Pete Alonso. Nobody wants to even bring up the possibility that Pete Alonso may not be a Met next year. And I mean, like, when I do these videos, I'm not saying Pete Alonso is not going to be a Met. I'm not saying I don't want Pete Alonso to be a Met. But at the end of the day, we have to explore all the potential possibilities. Now, Pete's a free agent after this season. So as long as he doesn't have a contract, we have to really see what the options are. And David Stearns is brand new. We don't even know what his philosophy is. Yes, we've seen how he acts in Milwaukee, but have we seen his grand master plan? No. And, he's a guy, David Stearns, and David Stearns is what I'm getting to next. David Stearns has been on many different podcasts. He's been on different shows. He's been making the rounds in the last week. And the big focus in the last week, as he has constantly and consistently said, the goal for the 2024 Mets and the goal for any season, and for that matter, is to make the playoff. So he has been quite forceful in every conversation. When they asked him, what is your goal? My goal is to make the playoff. Now they ask him, how do you see your team? How does the team look? In the eyes of David Stearns, the team right now, and this is extremely important to recognize this fact, the team is incomplete. If there was a report card right now and you are being fair, the grade has to be an INC for incomplete. He knows the team right now is not ready to do battle for a World Series. No, he's not. He's not mentioning it. That's number one. So the expectation that the Mets have set out, or the messaging that they have set out, is possibly to lower the bar. They're not saying we're going to make the World Series or World Series favorites. They're just saying we're going to make the playoff. And if you really look at the playoff picture, I mean, you have the Braves, you have the Dodgers, maybe you have the Phillies. But if 6 teams are going to make the playoffs, you're going to be competing with the likes of Arizona and the Reds and other young upcoming teams. And I think the Mets will do well, kind of like falling in that 80 to 85 win range. And that's all it really takes to make the playoffs. Then you got to get hot. But as long as the Mets are building, they're making progress. And as long as they make progress this year and they see Pete Alonso as that key piece to build around, I think they're going to give Pete the money. I really do. The only way that I see things going south is if they tank, or, not tank, but they play horrible the first 2-3 months. And then Stearns might say, hey, you know what? We're going to be in this for the long haul. This might be a 2-3 year rebuild. And by the time we're in the 3rd year, Pete's already 33 years old. It just may not be worth it to pay the guy $30 million for 3 years and not be good, or not be where we want to be. I mean, the goal is to consistently be a winner, but the really ultimate goal is, and I'm going to say, and anybody who's followed my channel, our goal should be to win a World Series. And that's the thing that I envy and admire, the Yankees for. The only goal for the New York Yankees is to win a World Series, or it's a bust. That's the philosophy. That's the mindset I want our New York Mets to have. I want a winning mentality. I don't want a losing mentality. I don't want to, we won 82 games. This guy, he was an all-star. I want my team to go deep in the playoffs and have a chance to win each and every year. So another rumor that I heard, or that I read, is that the Mets are gearing up for a 2025 Dodgers offseason. So meaning a bunch of payrolls coming off the books this year. In 2025, we're going to have a lot of money to spend. So, if we're going to try to give Pete Alonso $25-30 million, we could go after a bunch of free agents. We can go after pitching. We could go after, possibly a good batter too. So, I hope that's the case. But in the meantime, we have to build the blocks. We have to put the building blocks in place. And that's a great point. If Pete hits 50-plus home run season again, he's going to get paid. I mean, regardless, Pete's, since 2019, he's hit 53 home runs, 2020, 16, but he was set to hit almost 40, but we had the shortened season. He had 37 home runs, 40 home runs, 46 home runs. And then more impressively, in 2019, he had 53 home runs, 120 RBIs. 2022, 40 home runs, 131 RBIs. 2023, 46 home runs, 118 RBIs. So I'm one of those people who are of the belief that it is a talent, it is a skill to drive in runs. You need to be able to drive in runs. And Pete has not only hit home runs, but he's been successful driving in runs. Now, what is it going to take to sign this man? What is it going to take? Is it Jerry Blevins was saying it's going to take an 8 to 10 year contract to sign the man. He kept saying you're going to have to give Pete Alonso a Miguel Cabrera or an Albert Pujols-like contract to sign the man. I don't think that's necessarily the case. You know, if you look at recent first basemen of his ilk, you have to look at, Freddie Freeman, you have to look at Matt Olson, and they didn't come close to an Albert Pujols length contract, a Miguel Cabrera length contract. So I think there are two options you can have. I think the sweet spot for the New York Mets, the best case scenario is a 6-year contract, but it's going to be tough to get him on a 6-year contract. I think the sweet spot would be 7 years, possibly a 7-year, $220 million contract. That would bring us to about $31 million a year. That would bring us to paying Pete to his 37 years old. If you sign him this year, he's going to be 36. If you sign him when he becomes a free agent, that 7-year contract will take him to age 37. That's, I don't know if he'd be willing to do that. You're paying the man $31 million. He's going to be the highest paid first baseman in the game. He's going to be making $220 million. That would be like my max type of offer. If you want to sweeten the pot, this is what I would do. I would make the contract shorter. I would be like, okay, we'll give you 6 years and $220 million, and maybe we'll give you an opt-out after 3 years. So the contract would change like this. Instead of making $31 million a year, if you gave him a shorter contract, 6 years, that means he would be making $36 million a year. 36. So that is a ridiculous amount of money to pay. But, quite frankly, he is one of the rare guys in Major League Baseball who can consistently hit 40 home runs. And if he wants to, he can consistently hit 50 home runs as he continues to develop and go through his prime. I mean, last year, he should have hit 50 home runs. No problem. Two biggest problem. He got hit by a pitch, and that really curtailed his season. And number two, he had the crappiest protection, number 5th hitter in probably, baseball. Daniel Vogelbach was horrible. So he had no protection, and he was injured. So he should have had an amazing last year. This year, like I mentioned earlier in this video, he needs damn protection. Whether it's Soler, whether it's a Bellinger like Jerry Blevins suggested, he needs a professional bat. He needs a professional bat. What's up, Explosive? How's it going tonight? You're right. Pete will get $250 million plus from Cubs or Giants. I don't see him staying. Now, if Pete is all about the money, I think there's a good possibility he's going to leave. Now, here's where David Stearns really has to do his due diligence, do his job. If he, people talk in the industry. If they know that the Giants are going to make him a $300 million offer or a $350 million offer, which that would be crazy, then obviously you got to get something for him. That would be the worst case scenario would be that if he loses, he leaves and you get nothing for him. But I don't know how many Met fans would give him $250 million plus. I don't know. Because then it doesn't really seem smart. It really doesn't. If the Cubs just give him that Godfather offer, if they give him between $250 and $300 million and they approach 10 years, you got to look at Pete. Yes, we love Pete. He's our guy. He's a homegrown guy, but he's not an athlete who's in the best shape. He's a heavy-footed first baseman. It's not like he's a Mookie Betts. Like Mookie Betts, you could see he's an athlete. He's a guy that, could be healthy for like 10, 12 years. Francisco Lindor also, he's a guy who I could see as being healthy throughout the duration of his career. So that's where you really run the risk when you do these long-term contracts. I'd be interested in making him the highest paid, giving him a record contract, but giving him a shorter term contract with a bunch of opt-outs. If he really wants to be in New York, he'll take the contract. If he doesn't want to be in New York and he wants to get every single last dollar, a lot of times at the end of the day, those type of contracts don't usually work out for the player and for the team. All right, so I want to go back to the last comment. So, hey Richard, how's it going? You're right. Alonso's too anxious. I don't know what that means. Is he too anxious for contracts? Is he too anxious at the plate? Yeah. So let me know what you mean about that. And then you also right. He puts it all in his shoulders. But last year, there was a lot of pressure on Alonso. A lot of pressure on him. There were times Nimmo. He had a good home run season, but he was a bit streakier than normal. And besides Lindor and Alvarez in certain parts, there was just a lot of offense that needed to be garnered by Pete Alonso. We need to get better offensively. There's no doubt about it. That's why, I think it's so blatantly obvious. If you're David Stearns, you need to add a damn bat. If you're a scout and you are a baseball man, right off the bat, you need more help in this lineup right now. Especially, if you had any confidence in Mauricio, and I did. I thought he was going to break out this year, but, you lose that guy, and that's a big loss in my opinion. If you mean deferred money should be on the table, if you mean deferred money, I wholeheartedly agree with that. If they become a little more creative with this contract, you got to get it done. If it's your guy and you think you're going to build around this guy, and like I said, Pete Alonso means more to the New York Mets than he does to any other team. And the Cubs, they realize that adding a slugger like Pete is going to elevate their team. Everybody, we all know this. If Pete is out of the lineup, we stink. We stink. Explosive Mets will lose Pete for nothing, like DeGrom, Wheeler, Stroman, and Syndergaard. Well, I mean, it's tough. It's really tough. A couple of these guys, because you're talking about two different regimes too. You're talking about the end of the Wilpon regime. So I mean, I can hold Steve Cohen accountable for DeGrom. But we were trying to sign DeGrom, so that's a little tough. It's really tough, and I think the Mets thought that they can get DeGrom on a 3-year, $120 million contract. That's tough, but I do agree. If you wholeheartedly believe that Pete Alonso is going to walk, and you have an 80% chance of losing him, that can't happen. That's where if you're David Stearns, you have to do your job. And I've said this time and time again. Our leadership in the past, whether it be Billy Epler, whether it be our other general managers, before that, they were garbage. They did not do their jobs. If they did their jobs, we wouldn't have a $320 million payroll today. We wouldn't have $70-something million paying to other teams. We wouldn't have a bunch of garbage on a roster. Marte, who 35 years old, and we don't know how productive he's going to be. Our roster payroll-wise is in shambles, and that's because of lack of leadership. That's because of bad leadership. We've been waiting for a guy who is a true leader and who is a true baseball man. We supposedly have that guy in David Stearns. So I'm hoping that the guy steps up and, he does the right thing. What's going on, Mark? You're right. I don't think that there's any way the Mets give Alonso what he's asking for. If he doesn't come down, he won't be a Met. The Mets will throw money at Soto. I wholeheartedly agree with this. I put my offer out there at $220 million. That was my high. And I structured it where he would be making either $36 million or $31 million. I mean, the Mets are talking about giving Pete Alonso a ridiculous amount of money. If Pete's looking to set records like he's a shortstop or a center fielder, it's just not going to happen. He's a first baseman. The highest first baseman contract, I think, was Matt Olson, or, it was 160 something million. We're already talking about beating that contract by a significant amount. He's not a shortstop. He's not a center fielder. He's not the best defensive guy. He doesn't run well. He can hit. That's what he can do. He can hit home run. So you're not going to pay him like he plays offense and defense, because he doesn't. So we're trying to pay Pete Alonso accordingly. If he wants to have an astronomical number, Mark, you're absolutely right. He's probably not going to be playing with the New York Mets. I don't see David Stearns getting ripped off. But finally, we have a man in our front office that will not get suckered into these horrible deals, that will not get ripped off. David Stearns is a numbers guy. He's very analytical, and he knows what Pete Alonso is worth to the New York Mets. And that's what he'll be determining in the next couple of months. Richard, his average plummeted. Yeah, his average was putrid this year. It was pathetic. But like I said, I don't know how much was that because he was hurt for 2 months, or was that because he had no protection in the lineup. I have to think that his average suffered a bit because of those two factors, because his career average is 250 something. So for him to drop 40, 50 points kind of tells me that something went wrong, because he was still a very good hitter, obviously. The Mets aren't really a clutch team. I can't argue with that. I don't think any realistic Mets fan can argue that. In 2022, when we had the possibility to seal the deal and to beat Atlanta at the end of the year, we did horrible. When we got into the playoffs and we had an opportunity to advance against the Padres, we didn't come up clutch. The only guy who came up clutch was DeGrom's pitching performance in Game 2, but there were nobody who came up clutch at the end of 2022 when we were in a position to go a couple rounds in the playoffs. So it's yet to be seen how many players. We need clutch players. We need to pitch better. We need guys who get timely hitting. And that's what it's really like all about. We need timely hitting when it matters. And at the end of the 2022 season, we didn't have timely hitting. And a lot of that core, whether it be Alonso, McNeil, Lindor, Nimmo, those guys who were our core back then are our core right now. So part of David Stearns' job is he's going to determine, is this the right team? Is this the right core for us to carry into the future and be successful and to win? Because frankly, our whole core is in their 30s, right? So if we sign Pete Alonso in 2025, he's going to be 30 years old. McNeil's 30 years old. Nimmo's 30 years old. Lindor's 30 years old. Technically, if you have a core that's in their 30s, that usually means you view your team as being set to win now. I don't see our team as being set to win now. For one, we have no really pitching staff other than Kodai Senga. All the other guys, whether it be Minaya or Severino, I need to see those guys pitch first. I need to see them to be successful. What's up, Juan? How's it going tonight? Absolutely. I think it was a significant impact on Alonso's numbers. I gotta be fair. Like if we looked at Pete going into June before he got hit, the guy was set to hit 60 home runs. He was a freaking beast. I wonder where Blake Snell and Jordan Montgomery go. Pitchers and catchers report on February 14th. Yep, so a little less than a month away. And you still got a lot of good free agents left. I mean, you got a crazy amount of free agents left. It is going to be interesting. I still think that these guys go to the highest bidder. I still think both those guys are going to get close to $200 million. I think Blake Snell's probably going to get $170 million. I see teams are willing to pay him $150. He wants $200 million. Probably going to meet somewhere in the middle, or then he gets some type of creative short-term contract. Those are the two options I see for Blake Snell. Jordan Montgomery, I think he's going to get around $150 million. And the teams, I'm not sure right now. It might be a team that really comes out of nowhere. And honestly, I was really surprised last week when I learned that the Yankees offered Blake Snell $150 million. I'm like, wow, they already got Garrett Cole. They got Rodon, and they were going to their number 3 starter. They were going to pay him $150 million. So the Yankees, they really got the pedal to the metal right now. And I don't know, I forget exactly who it was. One of the members on a community, he basically said that, and I did a video about this today. He said that the Yankees are really kind of like feeling the pressure from the Mets, that the Yankees feel it's really now or never, that the Mets finally have their guy, their president who knows what they're doing. And the Yankees feel that if they're going to really continue to run New York City, they're going to have to make their mark right now in terms of winning, because in 2 or 3 years, Stearns, I feel, is going to turn this thing around, and we're going to have a powerhouse. I really do. David Stearns has said this in every single interview, and he says this right to each person he interviews. He goes, number one thing is to have patience. It took him about a year and a half to turn things around in Milwaukee. It took him about a year and a half to turn things around in Milwaukee. This is New York City. We have a better team than what he took over. We have 10 times as many resources. So I see a really quick rebuild / retool. We have assets here. If he decides to trade up a couple people, honestly, I see a guy like McNeil, really, like, I don't see him being on the team much longer. A guy like Nimmo, he's got 7 years left on his contract. He's 31 years old. He's not a big defensive guy. I love Nimmo. He's my favorite player, but I see possibly Nimmo going. You just really got to kind of see how this team really gels and molds together. And I forgot who said it was Richard. The team hasn't been clutch, or whoever made that comment. You have to really determine like who is going to be your core going forward. If Nimmo's a guy that you see is going to get better as he gets older, and he's an outfielder. He's not a first baseman. He's not a third baseman. He's a guy that you need his legs. You see Marte. Marte is probably a freak of nature, one of the most athletic guys, and he's 34, 35, and he's breaking down. So how do you see Nimmo in 3 or 4 years? It might be a smart thing to do while Nimmo still has the trade value and still has a reasonable contract to look to move him. Oh, wow. I'm sorry. Like, for some reason, the comments didn't load. Okay, I'm going to get to these. So, Richard, he isn't the same hitter as when he was first called up. I have to assume you're talking about Pete Alonso, because that's what we're talking about. You know what? It's really funny. And I was talking about this with a couple friends. When I saw Pete Alonso win his first home run derby, as opposed to the last one when he was facing Julio Rodriguez, it did look like Pete was, you could tell like that Pete was much younger. He had more stamina 4 or 5 years ago, and as opposed to this time. I wouldn't say that he's not the same hitter. I would say that I wouldn't say he's a worse hitter. That's what I would say. I would say he's a different type of hitter. I would say he's a better hitter, to be honest with you. He's definitely better. He's not chasing the pitchers, low in the strike zone. He's not chasing the sliders away. He's a little more disciplined. And last year, I can't really measure it because of those two things we brought up: the injury and the fact that he had no protection. And there was so much damn pressure. Like in 2023, we had the highest payroll. You had Verlander, you had Scherzer. There was so much pressure on Alonso. I mean, it's if I'm being a realistic person, I can't really put that much pressure on him. Yeah, so Andy Martino said Pete will not talk extension. He's going to free agency. Well, that's typically been a Scott Boras client thing. Like all the Scott Boras's clients, and I'm sure you know this, they typically go to free agency. So, I mean, that's pretty like budge normal. What's up, Scott? You're right. I'd really like to see what Pete could do with some protection. Stearns seems to like the president that will make hard decisions with no emotional attachment. If they can't agree on a trade, then trade him. I think that you have to if you're gonna properly evaluate what Pete means to this team and what he can do in a solid lineup, you need a fifth guy. You really do. And if Stearns intends and he's serious about competing, you need a fifth guy in the lineup. You need a complete lineup. We've been searching for a DH/fifth guy for a very long time. Carlos Correa was supposed to be that guy last year. So we went into last year knowing we didn't have that bat we needed. I can't see us going into this season with a guy like David Stearns, with 2024 meaning so much to our franchise, not signing a guy like Soler or not getting a guy that you can slot into that fifth hole. I just can't see it. It'll help Pete Alonso up. It'll give the pitchers more run support. It will do so many things. It'll take pressure off our rookies. They won't be relied upon to produce at the levels you would need them to. Our lineup will be lengthened. There's just so many positive things about adding one more bat. Juan, great point. Too many what ifs with the Mets. That isn't attractive to free agents or good ball players to play for this team. And this is exactly what I was just saying for why 2024 means so much. And you brought up probably one of the biggest points. You want to show impending free agents that you're building something. You know, you don't want to show free agents that I just won 80 games or I just won 75 games and I'm losing Pete Alonso. No, you want to win close to 90 games, make the playoffs, surprise a whole bunch of folks, have these young guys come up and be successful, plus hopefully sign Pete Alonso. Then it'll show these incoming free agents that, oh, the Mets just won 90 games. They retained Pete Alonso. Their young players are coming up, stepping up, and they're going to sign all these new free agents. Wow, they got something going on there. And they got David Stearns, a guy who knows what he's doing. That's why 2024 is massive, is monumental to me. And it should be to everyone, because that is going to determine our future. Everybody, who's saying, oh, don't worry, we're going to do good for 2025 and beyond. To get ready for 2025 and 2026, that preparation starts today, starts now, starts yesterday. David Stearns has to be getting the moves now for the future. Oh, Juan, you're right. Mets got to tear this down and let the kids play. That's what is going to end up happening. Well, that's definitely a possibility, right? That's a direction. You know how David Stearns says he's got option A, option B, option C. If the season doesn't turn out the way he wants it to, and we're going down a very bad road, we're losing games, this and that, that's an option. That option is you play the kids and you start trading off pieces. That's not an option that I would want to go down, because I want this to more or less be a retool, not a rebuild. But that is, quite frankly, an option. Explosive. You're right. You're right again. Yankees got Nestor Cortez to that rotation. So, yeah. So, at least on the top of rotation, they got Cole, Cortez, and Rodon. But, Rodon's often injured. But at least they got three guys to rely on. So quite frankly, if they would have signed Blake Snell, they would have gave $150 million to their number 4 starter or number 3 starter. So we should trade McNeil or Marte this year. We have young players to fill those spots. Jet Williams is coming. I agree with that, but I don't think that anybody would really trade Marte right now. Marte would have to do, and here's the good things about Marte. Marte only has 2 years left on his contract, right? If Marte has a good 3 or 4 months, I think if David Stearns was smart, you would definitely trade the guy to a contender while Marte raises his value, because he's making $20 million a year. If he shows that he's anywhere near a good player, you trade this guy. You trade him. So I would agree with that. He just has to raise his trade value right now, because at this moment, Marte has 0 trade value. McNeil, I'm 100% on the trade McNeil train. He's not a guy. If we were a winning team right now, and he's like a guy, a jack of all trades who could play everywhere, and he's a batting champ, but he's a guy who's virtually, in my opinion, useless on this team. What's up, James? Patience equals lots of losing to come. Well, yeah, it could be, or it could be what the Yankees did in 2016 when they, bought out Alex Rodriguez, Mark Teixeira, and when they did their quick rebuild, they made a couple key trades. And people thought at the time when the Yankees did it, they're like, oh, you can't do this in New York. It'll be a 3-4 year rebuild. They brought up the young kids, Aaron Judge, Gary Sanchez. They got lucky with a couple key utility players that they brought over. But that's with David Stearns. We could do the same thing. We got guys, we got offensive guys in the minors that are ready to come up. Acuna, like was just mentioned, Jet Williams, Drew Gilbert. We got a couple of really good young studs. Unfortunately, Ronnie Mauricio, my favorite player, is not going to be amongst them, but he could also be a later reinforcement for September and late August. So, not all is lost for him, but bottom line is we could do the same. The thing where we're lacking is we need help pitching. Now, David Stearns is highly confident that Sean Manaea has transformed, that he is pitching unlike he did in the beginning of his career. He's got a developed fastball. He's got added velocity on his fastball. He's got a slurve or slider or whatever pitch that he developed. So he's got a new repertoire. So he's excited to see how this new guy pitchers, supposedly. Luis Severino, he was tipping his pitches. So with this correction, he's excited to see how Luis Severino reverts back to form. Luis Severino was highly successful before he was supposedly tipping his pitches. So you got those two guys who are supposedly better. And then you add that to Kodai Senga, who did phenomenal last year. Quintana, who had a very underrated season. And, and one of your fifth starters have to work out. Adrian Hauser, McGill, Peterson, one of those guys, I agree, have to step up, and they have to step up in a big way. And that's why I'm a big advocate of getting one more pitcher. So, the more depth, the better. And not to mention, who's that guy the Mets they traded? Cooper Hummel. The guy that the Mets picked off waivers that nobody knew who he was. I know we traded him away for like cash considerations, but it's a guy that David Stearns is wheeling and dealing. It's a guy we picked up and we got something for nothing. Like everybody's like, oh, he's a catcher. Like, what are we going to do with him? We got like 50 catchers. All right, we got a little extra cash. We increased our assets, by trading him away. And it was a guy we just picked off waivers. Hey, Richard. No, Richard, I know you said a lot of good stuff today. and Richard, I'm one of those. There's two thought processes here. There's one thought process that believes the team is not far away, right? They believe that we have a core. They believe that we can build the pitching, that we can add depth. And there's another thought process that we should trade all our veterans, all our core, and just play the kids. I'm of the belief that we're not that far and that we can rebuild, we can get younger throughout the years by not giving it. Well, we just do it organically. What you're going to do is throughout the years, you're going to assimilate these young players like David Stearns says. And we don't need a dramatic rebuild where we trade 4 or 5 core players away and our entire roster is young guys. We don't really need to do that, at least not right now. Explosive. I gotta say, explosive. You always got like great stuff. How about we make Brody GM next year? Mets need a GM, and Brody is well versed in this organization. He can come in with no transition. I gotta say, you usually got great ideas, but this is not one of them. Brody right now has, he spent his time with the Mets. He was good friends with Jeff Wilpon. He got us Edwin Diaz, And that trade is, I got to say, not looking nearly as bad as it did in the past. But that being said, Brody Van Wagenen, I'm a lot happier that we have a guy like David Stearns, because Brody Van Wagenen, I got to say, I give him credit. He was a deal maker. Like, if you wanted action, if you wanted to see new players come in, Wagenen was good for that. He was exciting. He got Cano, even though he was old and washed up, but he got Diaz, good lights out closer, but you had to trade away your number one prospect, a guy that could still do damage, and now he's going to be in Atlanta. But at the end of the day, the Brody Van Wagenen regime era, the door has closed, and I think we're ready to move forward with David Stearns. Yep, Juan, this completely. We need a DH / fifth hitter. We need a fifth hitter. I'm gonna say this till we get one. We need a fifth hitter. Everybody, every single, and I know a lot of people who cover the Mets. The thing is, the Mets job, David Stearns' job, is not done until he gets a fifth hitter. It's blatantly obvious. And I expect him. Because I see David Stearns as somebody who's competent. I view him as competent. So I expect him to get a guy who can protect Pete. Like, Billy Epler going into last year with Vogelbach batting behind Pete, that's one of the many reasons I view Billy Epler as incompetent. You spend all that money on a rotation, Verlander, Scherzer, you invest all that money and you don't get a number 5 hitter? Yeah, Richard, you're right. I would like to see what Buck could have done with this year's team, but our current manager should install a winning culture. I mean, I would have loved, honestly, I was a big proponent. I love Buck. I always had confidence that our manager was that much smarter than the other managers. Now we have a rookie manager. And, he could be like an Alex Cora. He could come out and be an amazing manager. But we already had a guy who had all the knowledge in the world, and he didn't have the best GM. The GM was telling him bat Vogelbach in the 5th spot, and Buck was saying no, and there was a big fight between both of them. So that tells me all I need to know about Billy Epler. Yeah, so what was interesting, and I made a video. I mentioned this in another video, so I'm pretty sure a lot of you saw there was an interview. Andy Martino was interviewing David Stearns. He was interviewing David Stearns, and how Andy Martino, he's got like a little kind of like a smart aleck approach, and he goes, David, how do you feel about the offseason? Kind of insinuating like, your offseason wasn't good. But the first question, or the response David Stearns gave was a great response. He goes that it's not about winning the offseason. It's not. It's about winning during the season. Last year, we won the offseason, and during the season, we sucked. We were horrible. So, and then he also said that it's a continual process. We will continue to get better every single day. Our team will never be set. Stearns is a guy who will wheel and deal. He will trade players to continually get better. He will acquire players. He will flip them. If he gets incrementally better on every single move, he sees us as continually building success. So, the stuff that I get from David Stearns tells me that this guy is always going to be busy. So, I'm confident. Until I see this man fail, I'm going to have all the confidence in the world in David Stearns. Yeah, I 100% agree with that. I 100% agree with that. There are a lot of free agents in 2025, so there just might be like so many out there. But the ones that we really want, if we don't show that we've built anything, at least the team that free agents would want to go to and sign long term, then 2024 we have to build. We have to build. We have to make the playoffs. I'd like to win close to 90 games, but we certainly have to build. Vientos will be our DH to start the season. I mean, I still don't see this team complete. I mean, I think it's slotted out that way. It's a possibility. And Vientos, I don't want to shortchange the guy. He's a young guy, and he could break out. He's got a lot of talent. He's got a lot of power. He's got a lot of pop. So, just because I say we need a professional fifth hitter, a guy who's already been established, that means that I want to make the lineup that much better, that much longer. And still, I don't want to put pressure on Vientos to protect Pete right off the jump. I'd rather take the stress off the guy, let him develop. If it's really about developing the young kids, let the kids develop properly. Hey Daniel, what's going on today? Hopefully you're having a good night. It's so funny. Like I was literally going to bed, but I'm like, I can't really go to bed because I hear all these insiders talking about, is Pete going? Is Pete staying? And, at the end of the day, nobody really knows. Pete could be like, hey, I'm going. And then tomorrow he's like, I'm staying. So we gotta really kind of wait to see how things develop. Hey, Robbie, good seeing you too. One of the great members of the channel. Hopefully you're doing well. Mark, I think Alonso's biggest improvement this year will be hitting around 290. And what did that be? In his walk year, watch Pete. He hits around 300, smokes 50 bombs, hits 120, 130 RBIs. I mean, that I could see it. I could definitely see it. The guy would be in for a monumental contract. But at the end of the day, and I'm going to always repeat this, he's an offensive player. He doesn't play offense and defense. He doesn't play a premium position. He doesn't play shortstop. He doesn't play center field. Based on what the market has shown us, he shouldn't be paid anywhere close to $300 million. $220 million should really be the max. People were saying Aaron Judge-like contract. I mean, that's just insane. The thing about McNeil, all right, first of all, McNeil, let me check how old. Is he 32, 33? And, I'm always pretty hard on McNeil. So McNeil is going to be 32 years old next year. 32 years old. One time in his career, he hit over 10 home runs. That was 2019 when the ball was supposedly juiced. His career batting average is 298, which is very good. His career on base is 361, which is very good. And he does play multiple positions. He plays outfield. He can play anywhere around the diamond. I don't really like him at third base. I don't think he has an accurate arm. I've seen him play there at third, and I just don't think he's good at third. But he can play short. He can play second. He can play third in emergency, and he can play the outfield. So he is good position-wise. But if you go to his Baseball Savant and you look at his advanced numbers, he has some of the worst Baseball Savant numbers that I've really seen. And I think with this guy only getting older, I don't really see him improving over time. And he's very streaky. He is very streaky. And the thing that I dislike Jeff the most is he's one of the most emotional guys on the field that I've seen in a long time. Now, if your goal is to win a World Series and you consider Jeff as a part of your core, you don't need a guy who's a loose cannon who's going to just throw his glove and, that negative energy is going to be spread throughout the dugout. You don't need that. You need a guy who's going to be positive. You need a guy who's going to lift the team up, not lift the team down or bring the team down. So, that's the type of guy that I see Jeff. And it's not like, oh, he's got a negative attitude and he pops 50 home runs. No, he pops 10 home runs, and he's a dink and dunk type of hitter. I'm not a big fan of this guy. I don't see him getting better as he ages. All right. Well, folks, we're gonna wrap things up. It's about 2 a.m. So Richard, I'm assuming you're you're on the West Coast. But I thank everybody for stopping by. A little tired tonight, but hopefully everybody's gonna have a great night. I'm just gonna go. Let's go Mets. Any new things come out, we're gonna be on top of that. Hopefully we get a signing. I'm gonna predict a signing will come soon because I got all the confidence that David Stearns is able to recognize that we need to protect Mr. Pete Alonso. So have a great night, everybody. I will talk to you soon. Take care.